So I'm going to talk about Migrant Mother, and which is the story Mary Coyne is written about Migrant Mother, and we could really seriously have an entire panel just about Migrant Mother, because people have used this image to make an argument about race, about gender, about class, about America, about all kinds of things. She was used in many different ways. And here's what it looked like when Migrant Mother was first published and put out. So the photograph is made by Dorothea Lange. I'm going to be talking about Dorothea Lange, and I'm also going to, by way of introduction, explain my very strong interest in the subject. Start back from when I became a mother in 1997. I felt really isolated, and I didn't know when I would ever possibly be able to make another artwork. I'm not thinking in terms of Toni Morrison, I should have talked to her, but taking care of a newborn baby. So I reached out to other artists who were also recent moms, and we formed a group called MAMA, or Mother Artists Making Art. And so we, similar to Dorothea Lange, in fact, and this gets talked about in Mary Coyne, the book. After Dorothea Lange passed away, her husband, Paul Taylor, was interviewed, and he said about her that she, Dorothea Lange, felt pulled apart all in her life. For her, there was a first responsibility in the home and a first responsibility to her photography. So in the world that Dorothea Lange came up in, she had to make a choice between being a mother or being a photographer artist. And in MAMA, we felt that not much had changed. We still had to make that choice. And that was true in the art world, that was true in feminist circles, that women still had to make that choice. We also felt that there are very few accurate representations of mothers. Most representations, depictions are made by adult children rather than actual mothers. So we felt that we had very important work to do. And so in our first meeting, as we were sitting around breastfeeding our babies, and feeling like sharing with each other that we weren't doing much else with our lives but breastfeeding all the time, our first pieces were about breastfeeding. And we were using breastfeeding, it meant to be a metaphor for the practice of mothering itself. So this is our very first piece. We showed in a jail, a former jail. And when we were first walking around, we thought we have to make a place where a mother could feed a baby. So a place to sit down at the art exhibition. And the way the piece worked is that you would hear the sound of a baby crying. And then the plumbing would start to lactate milk. So the milk would start to flow. And then you would hear each of the MAMA members discussing their experiences, their thoughts, their theories, ideas about mothering. And then it would repeat. So there was a cycle, the milk stops and then it repeats. What do I want to say about that? We didn't feel that there was any universal, any statement to make about breastfeeding, but that what each of us had to say, each of our specific stories were important. The next piece we did was called Milk Stained, and it was a webcast performance done through LA Freeway. And we felt that we were that we were going through all these kind of different emotions that we hadn't experienced before, and bodily sensations. And there wasn't language for, we didn't even know how to express what all this was about. And an overabundance of fluids. So this piece became about, this is MAMA member Deborah Oliver, and milk is just flowing and pouring out of her body. And we're gathering up the liquids and we're mixing it with other bodily fluids. And it was just kind of a world of bodily fluids and bodily sensations that really hadn't been spoken about much before. And our last piece about breastfeeding was about breastfeeding in public. And in this piece, we videotaped women who were breastfeeding in public, and we showed the piece on a bench out in public. And a police officer came by and looked at it and confiscated it, thinking that it was obscene. But we eventually got it returned. Doing all of these things, what possibly influenced us to do this? Well, one of our influences was the 1970s collective that they began in the 1970s called Mother Art. So the idea of forming a group of mothers came from this. They came out of the women's building. They were part of the feminist studio workshops there. And one of the rules at the feminist studio workshop was that it was okay to bring your dog, but it was not okay to bring children. So they got together and supported each other through this. They made artworks together and eventually applied for a grant from the California Arts Council to do artworks in laundromats around Los Angeles. Well, then Governor Ronald Reagan went on the radio and was talking about the waste in government spending, and he cited Mother Art as being an example of that, where housewives around Los Angeles were doing artworks in laundromats. So Mother Art thought that they needed to respond to that, so they picked up their brooms and their mops, and they decided to address the real waste in government spending and start cleaning up those savings and loans. So Mother Art still exists. They're still cleaning things up, and this is a more recent piece that they're doing. Another huge influence for us was Mary Kelly and her postpartum document. And this is a work that has many different facets to it, different parts. The one I'm showing you right now is where she showed stained diapers from her son. And then meticulously recorded exactly what he ate, and that was stenciled into the diaper. So this piece is about the complex relationship between a mother and child. It's trying to kind of understand and exactly explain what that is. But very important to the piece was not to have any photographic representation. All right, so that's Mama. How about Dorothea Lange? And who were her influences? Well, she never really cited having any influences. However, her main teacher in photography was Clarence White. And Clarence White was a pictorialist. And the way the pictorialists depicted mothers would be these beautiful women, usually middle class, with elegant children in beautiful ethereal light, doing some sort of idealized domestic scene in very soft focus. And Clarence White made images like that, and so did Gertrude Casabir. And Gertrude Casabir was a key pictorialist. She was living in New York at the same time as Dorothea Lange, and was a mother as well. And in this particular image, I think she's pointing to something way more complex than the typical pictorialist motherhood photograph. The only reason we know this woman is a mother, there's no children around her, is the fact it's the title. And it's very dark, it's storming, she looks troubled. So something very different and more complex. Dorothea Lange was a person who had, well, there were different parts to Dorothea Lange, of course. There was the art part, and then there was a more social justice, the person who was interested in social issues. And I think the influence for her in that characteristic would be Louis Hine. And he was definitely cited as a source with other Farm Security Administration photographers. That's who Dorothea Lange was working for when she produced Migrant Mother. So Louis Hine set the model for social documentary photography. And he had photographs that he titled Madonna photographs. And he's best known for his child labor pictures, but he also photographed immigrants who were just as soon as they came off the boat in Ellis Island in New York. And he understood the power of photography to be able to convince a middle-class viewer to have a sense of empathy or compassion for these people. There are a lot of negative stereotypes about these recent immigrants, and he tried to counter that in his photographs. So to give a sense that these people too have everyday lives, similar to middle-class people, that they too have loving families, and all these are meant to counter. He also would, this isn't the only picture he made that was termed Madonna. So he frequently photographed women too, and children without a father figure around. And that's a tactic that the Farm Security Administration would use as well in their work. Kind of the vulnerable women. All right. So Dorothea Lange liked to break through stereotypes, add complexities to things. And she would often photograph nurturing fathers. And so here's one of her FSA pictures of a drought refugee. And then she photographed her own husband and son together, so loving, nurturing images. She had 2 sons. They also had families. She shot more pictures of them in a very kind of loving way, so that we see men interacting with children. So art historian Sally Stein has called these her Padonna pictures. So what did she bring with her to the FSA? She had a successful portrait studio in San Francisco, so she knew how to make people relax in front of the camera. She knew how to bring out their inner characteristics. She knew how to make people appear attractive, even when they might not have been conventionally so. So she brought those skills with her, and having this background in portraiture, when she went on to work for the Farm Security Administration and needed to again explain to a middle-class audience what it was like to live through the Depression, she reached back to that portraiture thing. So she too, it was very important to her that she make her viewer understand what it felt like to be hungry, to be homeless, to be living out of your car, to be living in a tent, to not know where your next job came from. So to get that emotion from the viewer. And Roy Stryker, her boss, one of the things he said too is that news photographs are the noun and the verb, but our kind of photographs are the adjective and the adverb. So being able to explain how it felt to live through the Depression. So she brought those skills with her, and she also, so the way she would convey that is through facial expressions, through body language, through gestures. She would work through all that. So I want to show you the beginning images of the outtakes, I guess, of Migrant Mother when she first started to photograph her. So here's her description of what she was meant to write extensive field notes wherever she went. It's not accurate, as you find out through the book, that things are a bit different than what she says here. But she was meant to give all her negatives back to the FSA. She held this one back. I'm not sure why. She was criticized for shooting too much, and this is not her best negative, so maybe she held back for that reason. But if you look closely at, this is thought to be perhaps the first picture. We don't know for sure because she wasn't shooting with roll film, which is numbered. These are sheets of film, so we have to figure out which one came first. But notice where that rocking chair is, and then it moves here, like outside the tent, so perhaps for better lighting. She's experimenting here with getting the sulky teenager out of the shot, verticals, horizontals, and you can see that she's working as she would in the portrait studio, giving direction. I also want you to notice that what's the baby doing in these pictures? Nursing, asleep. I think in her own account, she worked very quickly to do this. I think she knew that she better work fast and not wake up that baby because it would all be ruined. But I'd like to make the case that the baby's still asleep right there. And I think that that might have been a direction that she gave the mother to make it appear as if she was nursing. I don't know. It looks to me like it's asleep and not nursing. So this photograph was sent on to the FSA, was published in some publications, but it's definitely not the best. As you can see, although